To build a multiracial democracy, Race Forward needs your support. Join us in dismantling structural racism. By texting RFPOD to 44321, you can help us make more episodes about important racial justice conversations. Support by donating $24 in 2024, a pivotal year for our work together. All donations are tax deductible. Again, support our work by texting RFPOD to 44321.
Hey listeners, and welcome to Momentum, a Race Forward podcast. I'm Rachel DeCruz, and I am the project director for Race Forward's upcoming Cultural Week of Action on Race and Democracy, which is taking place in partnership with Americans for the Arts this fall, September 27th through October 5th, in communities across the country. This new initiative leverages arts, culture, and creativity to elevate the need for a just, multiracial democracy. As attacks on racial equity and democracy continue to grow locally and globally, now is the time for bold action that inspires new ways of thinking. For more information on our new annual event and to submit a proposal from your local organization, local government institution, arts agency, community-based organization, or racial justice organization, see the link below in the show notes. We launched this initiative as we celebrate Black History Month, recognizing Black artists and culture bearers have produced some of the most profound bodies of work in this area, particularly during the Harlem Renaissance, the Civil Rights Movement, and Black liberation movements during the 1970s and 1980s. On this episode of Momentum, a Race Forward podcast, Ralph Remington, Director of Cultural Affairs at the San Francisco Arts Commission, essayist, playwright, screenwriter, and champion for racial equity in the arts, who presented a keynote for the City of San Francisco's Black History Month celebration on being African American in the arts, is going to be speaking with me, Rachel DeCruz, about his decades-long relationship in the arts and culture sector, pushing the envelope on culture and stories to continue moving the work of racial justice forward. Ralph Remington has extensive professional experience in arts administration and government and has experience as a director, actor, essayist, playwright, and screenwriter. Prior to joining the City and County of San Francisco, he served as the Deputy Director for Arts and Culture for the City of Tempe, Arizona. He previously served as the former Western Regional Director and Assistant Executive Director for Actors Equity Association in Los Angeles. Prior to that, Ralph was Director of Theater and Musical Theater at the National Endowment for the Arts, also known as NEA, in Washington, D.C. Prior to working at the NEA, Remington was a city council member for the city of Minneapolis. He is a former Guthrie Theater Acting Company member and is the founding producing artistic director of the award-winning Pillsbury House Theater in South Minneapolis. Here's our conversation. Hey there, Ralph. How are you doing?
All right. How are you, Rachel?
I am doing good. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Pleasure to be here.
So, Ralph, first off, congratulations on being the keynote speaker for San Francisco's Black History Month celebration. We're going to make sure to link to your powerful speech in the show notes so that our listeners can watch along afterwards. And the question that we want to start with today is, given your long and storied career as a trailblazer in arts and culture, how would you describe their impact on the world as we see it and how we'd like to see it?
First of all, thank you for having me today and for joining me in conversation. I think it's an interesting question. First of all, arts inform who we were and who we are and who we aspire to be. And that's why the arts are such a touch point and also can be a instigator of a lot of conflict and friction, because the arts tell us, kind of what our worldview is, and we're able to express through the arts indirectly how we feel about certain issues. And so instead of delivering a didactic speech or haranguing someone with an opinion, I can make a piece of work and have people reflect on the subject matter, whether it's through a painting or a play or a piece of music, so they can reflect on it, and upon reflecting on it, then take action in the world that they live in. And so we've seen this happen many times throughout history. whether we're talking about the Renaissance or whether we're talking about the Black arts movement in the 60s and the 70s, where Black artists, for probably the second time, because the Harlem Renaissance would have been the first time as well. So you have the Renaissance in Europe, you have the Renaissance in Harlem, you have the Black arts movement, the Age of Enlightenment. These are things, and you look at these periods of time, you see how art and culture are always at the center of it, or art is always at the center, and it creates what we think of as culture as a result. And so that's the impact. The arts help propel us to think more deeply about the actions that we take, the world that we live in, the path that we're trotting as a society, and make us maybe take a step back and take a pause to think about switching gears and maybe opening up our worlds to another point of view. So that's just for starters.
That's beautiful. Thanks so much.
Sure.
And I'm already going to go off script because I'm just curious, what do you think it is about the arts that unlocks this ability in people to be able to feel things differently?
I think you touched on it in the question, in that it makes people feel. Science doesn't make people feel. Math doesn't make people feel. The arts hit at our feelings and our emotions. And the arts address the intangible aspects of humanity that other things can't touch, that tangible reality can't touch.
That's beautiful. Thank you. So I want to pick back up on your keynote, which you recently delivered, and you opened that address by quoting the past and the present of hip hop, right? You talked about Drake, Melly Mel, Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, and Run DMC. Will you talk to us a little bit about how closely you feel hip hop is tied to this moment and what we can learn from hip hop?
Hip hop was a disruptor in our world, in the music world, and in our culture, really, because hip hop is now a culture. It started off as rap, and then rap on the stance of B-boys and DJs and MCs, that swag, that pose got adopted by society at large. And for the first time, little white kids were kind of peering inside of Black worlds, inside of Black communities, and the things that we deal with and struggle with. And they were hearing it directly from us, from Black folks and brown folks. And to hear it from Black and brown folks directly is different than hearing or seeing things through the filter of the news, where we're often portrayed as criminals and thugs and pests to society, quite frankly. And hip hop, for the first time, showed a whole kind of three-dimensional world that Black folks and brown folks live in. But I would say that it depends on which gaze the hip hop is coming from, right? Because sometimes it's catering to a white gaze, and sometimes it's catering to the Black community. And it's very different. I think in any art form, if you're a Black and brown person and you're doing it to cater to a white gaze, you're kind of taking into account how that's going to land with white audiences. If you're catering to Black and brown audiences from Black and brown people, you don't really care how it lands, because you're speaking the truth and they know what the truth is as well. But white folks, you're kind of spoon feeding them the truth. And you got to be really careful in that space, whether or not you're giving them things that are harmful for the community as opposed to things that uplift the community.
Thank you for that. So in 2021, you were appointed the first Black director of cultural affairs for the San Francisco Arts Commission in its 92-year history, which is a huge accomplishment. And in this keynote, which we're going to be referring to throughout the whole episode, you mentioned Black artists have shaped the very fabric of this nation and have confronted the forces of racism and oppression. Looking back at the uprisings in 2020 after George Floyd's murder, when the consequences of institutional racism were really on full display for the world, where do you think we've made the biggest gains?
Since George Floyd?
Yeah.
When these things happen periodically in our culture, riots or catastrophes or kind of a big tumultuous changes in the world, or something tragic that happens like 9/11, there's an immediate reaction. Reactionary forces go into play. And it's kind of easy to put those forces into play at the time when something occurs because it's present, it's new, it's something that everybody sees, so people don't mind spending money or putting attention towards it. You don't really have to sell the story. You don't have to tell the story because everyone sees it. It's current. The problem is when things aren't as current. And so with George Floyd, all of a sudden I saw more white allies in the public space than I'd ever seen in my career. Everybody was an ally all of a sudden. And a lot of these were some of the same people that I know said racist things, did racist things in their institutions. And sometimes I was a recipient of those racist harms that they did, but yet they're all of a sudden the most woke people around on the planet. That really makes me mad when I see people, white people especially, asking, what can I do? What's going on? I had no idea. Well, there is a thing called the internet. I mean, we have all the information. We got all of it, all at our fingertips. There is no excuse for people with resources, especially. They can access this very same information that I have. It's like, I'm not a guru that's coming from the top of a mountain with information that we know not of. I mean, we have it right in front of us, right? So that is, I think the big thing that happened with George Floyd was everything, all of a sudden, Black folks started getting hired in different positions that they had never been hired or even considered to be hired in before. All of a sudden, there were all these new programs, all kinds of money being thrown at it, all kinds of people throwing up diversity statements and anti-racist statements, putting stuff up on their walls and on their websites. But is it real? Is it real? And I think another thing that I addressed in my keynote, and really a big shout out to Isabel Wilkerson, because it's really not about race. It's about caste. And it's about the fact that race was used, or this thing, race was created, well, whiteness was created to create a caste system in the United States of America so that we could find out who was on top and who was on bottom. And so we could readily identify that was the uniform. Your skin was your uniform. And the uniform is what identifies us to everyone else, to tell them and to tell us where we're supposed to live, where we're supposed to play, who we're supposed to love, who we're supposed to marry, who do we have children with, where can we buy a home. That's what it was set up to tell us. You can buy homes in this space, and I can buy homes up here in this space, and never the twain shall meet. And so it's a caste system, and caste speaks to the hearts and minds of people. They have said, that by the time a child is in fourth grade, they've already been poisoned enough to know where they are in society. So white children already are aware of their supremacy by the time they're in fourth grade. Black children already know their inferiority as the way the society looks at them, how inferior the society thinks they are. They've already ingested this through all the signals, all the media, all the ads, everything. So we have a lot of work to do to undo that. And it's all linked to caste, and it's all linked to how we place people in this kind of containerized existence.
Yeah, I saw Origin this past weekend, and I read her book as well. And I've been thinking a lot about the concepts. They're big, and there's a lot there. So thanks for reflecting on that. I'm curious, when you were initially responding to the question, you started talking about the somewhat performative ways in which people were showing up after the murder of George Floyd. I'm just curious, in your kind of capacity as the director of cultural affairs, are there ways that you're working to really operationalize the commitment to racial equity so that it's more than just kind of a statement on the website or coming out in support after something terrible happens?
San Francisco Arts Commission, when I walked into the agency, it was a very white and historically white space. So we went about the work of really, I'll just take one example, for instance, in our hiring. The staff that interact with the community, that's how the community views who you are, by who they interact with, and how you value them by who you hire. I went about saying to all of my supervisors that when we're hiring for staff, we don't want to proceed with a search until we have a critical mass of people of color in that search
That's incredible.
pool. So we don't interview if we have like one person of color in a pool. We're not saying, oh, we're good. People tend to do that. Oh, we have one here. We got one of this and one of this and one of this. We're good to go. It's like, no, we don't. And so as a result, we now have a 75% of our staff are people of color. And that went from, a white agency. We've invested $18.4 million in the African American community and the arts since the beginning of my tenure in January 21. Our voicing, our presence on our website, what we say, what we do, who we assist, our hands-on involvement are all community-based and designed so that we don't take on this kind of mantle of you're the huddled masses and you're lucky if you can talk to us. We don't take that stance. We're always active and communicative and interactive with the community.
That's beautiful. Thanks for sharing those examples. So Ralph, in your speech, you also talked about culture and stories being critical to moving America forward today, right? And you have an extensive background in theater and arts administration, most notably having served as the director of theater and musical theater at the National Endowment for the Arts. So just curious, in your opinion, what is the explicit connection between the arts and racial justice that helps fuel the fight for democracy?
I'll just say there doesn't have to be a connection between art and racial justice.
We've certainly seen a lot of examples of that.
Right. It all starts with intentionality, so you have to have the intention of what you're trying to do kind of with your art form. Personally, I've always been torn between art and politics, probably why I went on to later become a politician.
Yeah.
I've always been torn because for me, arts have always been a vehicle for social change. I've always thought that's the best use of art, to change hearts and minds and to change the way that society thinks. Even art for art's sake, I'm not opposed to it. But even when that happens, there's something that we're saying. Everything is political. Everything is intentional, or everything has an impact, let's say. Everything is not intentional, but everything should be. And I think that artists, instead of just throwing things out willy-nilly, whatever hits, that's what I'll go with. They should be really intentional about what they're trying to say, how they're trying to say it. And if they are using their work for social justice, which I think they should, then be intentional about that. Don't just say it, and learn about it. Know the area you're talking about. Be erudite with that particular subject matter. Be also open and curious. Because even when you know a lot, you realize you don't know a lot.
You just named kind of arts as a vehicle for social change and kind of a mechanism to be able to shift hearts and minds. And that, to us is really at the heart of what we're trying to do with the Cultural Week of Action on Race and Democracy, which is one of the reasons I'm so excited about that initiative. I think it's just an opportunity for us to really be, as you said, intentional about how we're making links between art and culture and the kind of governance structure that actually creates space for all of us to sit at the table. So I'm going to pivot us a little bit. Part of the ongoing work that's happening in the movement for equity and fair pay is for artists, musicians, and playwrights, right? And so in your speech, you mentioned Netflix and streaming services as being some of the drivers for kind of our stories. And you yourself are a member of SAG-AFTRA. And so as we look back at the historic strike that took place last summer, I'm curious what you see as the biggest wins for people of color that are working in the entertainment industry. And then also, what do we still have that we need to fight for?
Well, it's an interesting question. I don't want to speak on behalf of the Screen Actors Guild, but I will say that I voted for the current contracts. And I think that it definitely addressed pay equity in a way that hadn't been addressed before. A lot of the imbalance that was occurring with streamers and them taking most of the profits without sharing as much as they should have shared. I think the battle is not over. The biggest battle, in fact, is yet to come. And I think it's AI, right? It's here and it's not going anywhere. AI is as big a disruptor of the arts in our society, and film and TV particularly, as the advent of sound and talking pictures, and bigger. And so just like when sound came into existence for movies, all of a sudden these actors that were big stars didn't have great voices. So they lost jobs. So all these industries kind of change in time. And I just read an article, Tyler Perry was just going to make this big, huge millions and millions of dollars of investment in adding onto his studio down in Atlanta. And now he stopped that because he saw what AI is capable of doing. And so he won't necessarily need to invest in that way because he saw what the future looks like. Now he doesn't have to go to Mount Everest, or he doesn't have to go to Colorado, let's say, to film a mountain scene. He can just put it in text because it's text to AI now. And then you create visual pictures that are amazing. And so that's going to disrupt our entire industry, everything. And so I think the bad part about it is that a lot of people will lose jobs. And the movies and television and recording industry are never going to be the same again. Publishing industry, it's never going to be the same again. Everything that we knew of and how we knew about it and how we came to understand it will all go away. The good part, potentially, is that live theater and live performing will become more desirable, I think, because you can't replicate that experience. You can't create it through a machine. That interactive experience between actor and audience, or performer and audience, we can capture it and we can blast it out to every state in the union on Netflix or a streamer or something like that. We can do that. Those are things that can't be replicated or done better than a film, right? Those are things that are themselves. That's what it is. A symphonic concert is a symphonic concert. You're not going to be able to replicate that. Mm-hmm. But these next 5 to 10 years, we don't know what it's going to do, but I think a lot of people are going to lose jobs.
I'm scared of it. I'm not going to lie. Like, it just feels like it's this very big, powerful thing that I don't know if we even fully understand. And the progress is just happening so quickly. And I feel like the intentionality around what it means for like the workforce, for the world in general, we just haven't dug into those questions in a meaningful way. So moving into our last question, in the book Emergent Strategy, Adrienne Maree Brown, who was recently featured on this podcast, Momentum, she talks about the imagination battle. And she says, I often feel I am trapped inside someone else's imagination, and I must engage my own imagination in order to break free. In a lot of ways, that's really what we're trying to do with our upcoming Cultural Week of Action on Race and Democracy, to take really big, complex ideas like multiracial democracy and collectively imagine what our communities and neighborhoods would be like if we're successful. So I'm curious if you can talk to us about the role that arts and culture can play in creating a new imagination about what's possible.
Sure. I think that the very nature of art is about imagination and about creating reality again and again, a new reality. Every time you start a new book or, as a writer, or start a play as a director or an actor, you're starting from scratch. You're reimagining, something that may have already been done before, but maybe it's the first time. I'll say this, that in the San Francisco Arts Commission right now, and we're going to try to perhaps make it coincide with the Cultural Week of Action, we're doing a thing called Constitutional Conversations. So we're looking at the Bill of Rights and Amendments 13, 14, and 15, and looking at what was the intention of these things? How are they viewed now? What's the impact on community or on the minds of people and how they react and interrelate with each other in community? And should these things be changed or revisited? And having town halls around the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, having artistic activations and ancillary events around it. So that kind of thing speaks directly to our democracy, our particular American democracy, and how artists can help inform the future of what that conversation looks like.
Thank you, Ralph, for that really concrete, beautiful example about what would make an incredible Cultural Week of Action on Race and Democracy project. We're really excited about the initiative, which will be launching this fall, engaging communities across the country, artists, local arts agencies, local government agencies, community-based organizations. Our goal is to get as many folks as possible participating, engaging in these conversations, and trying to leverage arts and culture to build the kind of world that we all want to live in. Ralph, so if people want to learn more about you, your work, and the upcoming kind of initiatives that you're working on, where can they go to get more information?
They can go to my Instagram at Remington Ralph, or Facebook Ralph Remington, or LinkedIn or Threads at Ralph Remington. They can also Google San Francisco Arts Commission and also find San Francisco Arts Commission on LinkedIn, on Threads, and anywhere where social media exists.
And for folks who are looking to learn more about the Cultural Week of Action on Race and Democracy, that information can be found on Race Forward's website. So thank you so much, Ralph, for joining us today. I really enjoyed our conversation. I learned a lot. You made me laugh, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Rachel. I really appreciate you and the time you spent talking with me today. So thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Momentum, a Race Forward podcast. We want to thank Ralph Remington and the City and County of San Francisco for making this episode possible. Make sure to follow Race Forward on social media on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter/X. And to support our work, make your $24 donation for 2024 by texting RFPOD to 44321. That's RFPOD to 44321. Until next time, let's keep the momentum going.